Good morning, Magic Crew. I am here today with Morgan, MTG judge, but also D&D aficionado, and he is here to clear up some of our concerns, but also bring to light many things to know about dice in competitive Magic. Outside of that, Morgan, maybe you could explain who you are and how long you've been playing both maybe Magic and D&D.
So I've been playing D&D since first edition for decades and decades. I started in elementary school, uh, and I've been playing Magic since Tempest. I've recently become a judge.
You're like one
Um,
of the OGs almost.
yeah,
Tempest
yeah,
Goes Bar. That's good.
yeah.
That runs deep. That's past
We've
Urza
uh,
Saga block.
we've ground against your grandpa many a time,
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and I remember all those decks he's talking about. Um, but aside from that, I've in university I studied among other things. Econometrics, statistics,
hmm
and because I'm a huge grognard, a huge nerd, I'm very fascinated with dice.
Right.
And because of my background in academic business, I'm interested in how products are manufactured. Um, and
Beautiful. So you're
yeah,
gonna know more or less the ins and outs of these spin downs and these D20s, how they relate, what's different. So why don't you lay it on us? Why is it that we are not going to be using spin downs versus the D20s when it comes to like these new random actions for these D&D cards?
so we don't know that. We might very well use spin downs, and hopefully, if that comes to pass, I can say that while it's not good, it's not better than the other bad option. Um, and I do want to pass say that we don't have a comprehensive rules update on dice rolling. Where I'm
Okay.
expecting one, so nothing I'm saying is coming from an official judge. I'm merely talking about kind of my experiences playing dice games. Um, and everything I say is not endorsed by Judge Academy or Wizards of the Coast um, but the arguments that I hear about spin downs is that they're not properly balanced, so therefore they favor certain numbers. And while this
hmm
is technically true, dice are a combination of factors, and those factors add up to produce their bias, which is what numbers they prefer to roll. The argument that I've heard many times is because there is less material removed on the low numbers of spin downs than on the high numbers, because all of these are carved in and not painted on. There's more mass on the bottom of a spin down there, therefore pulling it up. Um, and I've heard the argument multiple times that spin downs are not, because they're not meant to be rolled, they're not tested, and they're not calibrated to be rolled.
Okay.
I would like to make the argument that D20s aren't tested and calibrated to be rolled either. Um,
Okay.
so we're talking about not to talk down about this game that I love, but we are talking about things that are manufactured with the standards of toys. So when a manufacturer makes this thing, he's thinking this is a toy. Whether or not it's meant for children, whether or not it's meant for adults, there's still those are the tolerances and those are the quality level that they're looking at getting.
hmm
Um, so to go back, there's three aspects that really determine the bias on a dice, and that's the homogeneous weighting,
Okay.
which is air bubbles in the dice, voids in the dice, and just the density of material making up the dice can pull it in certain ways.
Yep.
The precision of the corners and the precision of the shape. So all polyhedra are a mathematical theorem. Mathematicians of old, Aristotle, and all these big deals in mathematics have determined that these are the shapes that make fair dice, or dice that have an equal chance of showing up on each side when thrown. But producing these mathematical perfect shapes as a product is the challenge, and as a real thing. So the closer you can get a manufactured product to that perfect mathematical shape, the better it's going to be
hmm
as a random number generator. And the most important aspect of how a dice rolls is how it's thrown. Whether it's cast long ways over a craps table, or whether it's picked up and dropped in front of you at a gaming table. So, if we look at casino dice, they solve a lot of these issues. So casino dice, if you notice, are perfectly square. If you have a little tiny speed square, and you can see it's really hard for you to see, but it's perfectly flush.
I have some of these myself. They make very excellent dice for my ether vial.
They're made out of a clear plastic, and that's not an aesthetic choice. They're made out of clear plastic so you can look at them and you can inspect them and see that there's no big air bubbles or that you've got a homogeneous substrate that it's made out of.
The air bubbles thing, I never even thought about that.
Yeah,
those are things you cannot see within a solid object.
So
someone could have a D20, for example, and I guess they've discovered by rolling it some numbers are higher than others, and because it has some sort of air bubble defect within the die.
Yeah, and that's an argument. If you look at this guy, there's a huge air bubble in the middle of it.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's also nowhere near square.
I'm going to show you. You can see the air bubble, people. That's not a fair die.
Yeah. So my argument is, if we can see the air bubble in this, why are we to assume that this is a pure medium just because it's opaque?
Right.
There might be a huge void in it. There might be, even if there's not a void, there might be a dense area in the plastic.
Yep.
So the solution to that is not really achievable. So if you look at, they recently redefined, or they're creating an object to redefine the standard of the kilogram, and it's created out of pure silicone. It's a sphere. And it is perfectly balanced. If you were to make a dice out of that, we'd be on the right track of making a perfectly balanced dice. The problem is that the kilogram sphere made out of silicone is priceless. I've tried to find out how much they paid for it, and I can't find anywhere. And every time I see somebody in the academic field that's involved with it, somebody asks them, how much is this worth? They go white and they say, oh, it's completely priceless. Please don't touch it. The entire room stops when anybody picks it up. It's this priceless artifact that probably costs a ton of money to make. So to think that we're going to make dice out of that for our games, as important as I feel Magic is to my life and all of our lives, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not practical.
Yeah. I want to talk about corners, because there's a lot of misconceptions about the corners of dice. And if you look at casino dice, they are very sharp cornered. If you look at gaming dice, dice at a game store,
you got to make sure you keep these really far away from your cards.
Yeah.
Don't roll them on your cards. They will dent and scratch up everything. That's the only downside I have to these dice. They're beautiful, they're large, they're chunky. They will kill.
They're meant to be thrown, down a purpose-built craps table, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The rounded corners come from two things. One is manufacturing. So when they cast these dice, casino dice are milled. So they have a block of plastic and a machine that mills them perfectly square. Gaming dice are cast. So they're molded just like a miniature. If anyone has seen a Warhammer, or anyone has seen any kind of miniature game, they're crafted just like that. They're cut off the sprue, and then they're tumbled in a giant stone tumbler that gives it these soft edges.
Yeah, you can see it's very soft on this spin down here. All these spin downs have very soft corners.
These have a benefit for us because square edges do a couple things. Square edges increase deflective force and chaos in the roll when the dice is at a state of high energy, i.e. when it's thrown down a craps table at high speed. Mm-hmm. But they decrease chaos when the dice is at a period of low energy, because it's harder to push a dice over like that if it's got a square corner than if it's got a rounded corner. So when the dice doesn't have a lot of energy to it, it's easier to plant a dice, and they don't change faces as often with the square dice.
Yep.
In a gaming table, we don't have a lot of space. I'm not going to be throwing this across a Magic table. I barely have enough room for my playmat and my cards and my Mountain Dew and my Funyuns. So we're going to be picking this up. We're going to be rolling it. We're not going to be casting it. And if you do start casting it, there's going to be some complaints. So the round corners do kind of help us.
What do you mean by
But they
complaints?
do.
Like, hey, that you didn't really roll that much.
You're,
That
you're going to
isn't
get some
sufficiently random.
complaints that we're playing a game of Magic, and that the guys next to us are rolling dice into our play space.
Oh, okay.
Just
I see. I
just
see.
because we only have the essentially the combat zone to roll dice in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my main take home is that these companies, as much as we want them to produce a good product, and I believe they do. I've got tons of dice. I like these companies. I have nothing bad against them, but they are producing relatively inexpensive goods, and relatively inexpensive goods cannot be calibrated to be a mathematical or precision device.
So, in your opinion, should all the standardized dice for official tournaments be transparent, like clear?
Yes and no. The bubbling is not all mistakes in the weighting of dice can you see. So even though a dice is transparent, you can't see any bubbles. That doesn't mean that it's not denser on one side or the other. The milling of casino dice helps with that. In that, when we're casting dice for gaming dice, it's we're trying to do two things at the same time. We're trying to get the shape, and we're trying to get the mold filled with a homogeneous mixture. Milled dice, all they have to worry about is getting a homogeneous slab, and then they worry about the shape. So it's a two-stage process. As depressing as it is, all dice have a bias, and we're not going to get away from that. For years in D&D, it hasn't really been a problem because D&D is a cooperative game. We all kind of want to win, and we all kind of want the players to do well. And it's just kind of deep in our souls that we kind of know that all dice kind of roll a bit better that people use. And that's just okay because we want the campaign to go on.
Yeah.
As for the microwaving dice, I've heard that a few times. I've never tried it. I don't know if it works. And I don't know if there'd be lasting impact.
You're getting huge compliments on your mustache.
Thank you.
The deepest mustache, or sorry, the dopest mustache of all time, says James.
Thank you.
Okay, so all dice have a bias. We could definitely agree on that. It's not going to be perfect, like especially when it comes to, I mean, I guess they don't have to carve out the numbers in the dice. They could paint them on. So we're going to have to live with this bias. What do you think is Oh, hold on. Okay, let's talk about can you talk more in detail about the difference between the spin down and the D20 and how if you think that the spin down is much more unfair or not versus a D20?
Yeah. So if we look at a D20, the number placement on any dice isn't random. It's very specific. It just appears random. So if you look at a D20 or any dice, the face of a dice meant to be rolled will add up to n plus 1. So a 20-sided dice has 20 sides. If you add up the front side and the side directly opposite to it, will be a 1. So it will add up to 21. 18.
So there's a 1 at the other side
here. The other one is a 3. And it will keep that pattern back and forth throughout the entire thing. A spin down is obviously 20, 19, 18. It has to have adjacent sides. The next number in sequence has to have adjacent sides. The reason why that's balanced is not necessarily the carving, is because the types of games we play are not exact number games. I'm looking for a high number. I'm looking for a low number. So if this dice is biased towards the 20, if it kind of fails its bias and hits an adjacent number, it's still a high number. Where if this dice is biased towards the 20 and it fails to hit its 20, it can hit an 8, a 2, a 14, or an 18, which is an equal number of high and low numbers.
For people who might not know, learning for the first time, a spin down, the numbers are very close to each other. 20, 19, there's probably an 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. Hence why they're the spin down.
Yeah, and it's, you know, if you've ever tried to count life, if you're an old Magic player like me, and you've ever tried to use a d20 as a life counter, it's miserable. You got to like pick it up and look for the next number and then put it down and pick it up, and it's
Yeah, I know.
awful.
I was
Um,
doing that with spin downs for the longest time until someone told me, "Hey, the number is right next to each other."
they spin.
Doing I was doing myself a disservice because I just assumed I had to pick it up and look on a random side to find the closest number, but no, it was right next to each other every time.
So yeah, I do agree with GP in that there's been way more discussion about dice than there deserves to be. But my argument, I had a friend ask me, he's like, why do you care about this so much? And my argument is that Magic players have all of the tools and information they need to determine, to watch an opponent and say, is he fairly shuffling his deck? Do I
Hmm.
feel that he's fairly shuffling his deck? And if they choose not to use that information, that's not my problem. But the community itself has that institutional knowledge. And I think that doesn't exist with dice. So I think that if you find this boring, this might be it might be pointless, but at least, you know, if we can inject this into our community, we can say now our community has the institutional knowledge to be able to say this is a fair dice, this is an unfair dice, that's a fair roll, that's an unfair roll.
Okay, then what do you can let's talk about that. Let's talk about some actual practical ways of using dice because I never thought anything of it, but do you think a spin down can be uh someone could practice using a spin down to the point where they could just roll high numbers?
Yes, I think someone can
Yes.
practice with a d20 and roll high numbers, and
That's
I've seen
impressive.
it many times in playing D&D. So how it works is, I'll see if I can get a decent angle. Is
Get a
they're
decent
holding the
angle.
dice in
Tell
such a
us.
way that they know what number is up, and then
Mm-hmm.
when they roll
Yep.
it, they release it in such a way that it's metered and it has enough energy to make one rotation and plant. That's the most common and easiest dice cheat to learn. And I've seen people that are really good at it. I've seen people that don't have to look; they just need to load the dice in their hand, do it, and it's more than half of the time the number that they want. Um, if they're good at it, they don't roll a 20 every time, but they
Mm-hmm.
cluster around high numbers. It would be easier to do with a d20 because if you miss, you're still going to be in the ballpark.
You mean a spin down? It'd be easier to do with the
Yeah,
spin down.
with a spin down, it's going to be that's an easier cheat to do.
So okay,
Um,
now that we know this, it should spin downs be allowed to determine who goes first in a game of Magic?
yes and no. I'll say yes because it's been working pretty good so far.
Well, we don't know
As long
that.
as they're rolled fairly and rolled genuinely. We
We
don't,
only
yeah.
know the
But
cheats
my
that we
argument is
catch.
we don't know. A d20 can be cheated as well, and I don't even have
Hmm.
to have physical hand skills to cheat a d20. I can do a float test and determine exactly where my biases are in my dice. I can go buy a pound of dice for
Yeah.
very cheap and spend a day with a cold saltwater solution that increases the density of water so the dice floats, and I can find where the bias is, and then I can
Ooh,
choose a series of
we're
seemingly
going
random
deep here.
dice.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it can be done, but you know it's the point where, you know, that's the point where you're it's a lot of effort for probably not a lot of gain. We haven't seen really metagame breaking D20 cards yet, so
No, no, no. But I want to know about winning. Just even because we've been determining the die roll with dice since the dawn of
with
time,
dice, yeah, yeah,
and winning the die
yeah,
roll is a huge advantage, especially
it's
for
huge.
combo players, for aggro players, and so like while this may not be a big deal for the 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 mechanics in Forgotten Realms, I still think this is a very big. If this is true, and I never thought about this, about how a spin down could be unfairly abused. I mean, this could have been going on for years, and like you said, if someone knows how to detect which spin downs are not weighted properly. I mean, I've seen people have so many really suspicious die rolls that didn't seem
Yeah,
that random to me. But
yeah.
like whatever, like they dropped it, big deal. I see that we have got a lot of super chats. We're going to get through them, but before we do that, how would you consider a die roll to be sufficiently, even if it was a spin down?
Ma-
How is it sufficiently randomized?
Many judges I've heard argue that in competitive REL, when matches are determined, so
Hmm.
should first player be determined.
Oh yeah, it
Um,
should have been like this
and
for years, just so that some people don't get
I,
to go first 10 times in a row.
I can't argue against that. I think as players, we need to, just as we should be watching our opponent when they shuffle and making
Hmm.
sure that we are knowledgeable enough and feel like they've randomized their deck properly. We should be watching them when they roll dice.
Sure, but we don't know
The
what
two
is the
second shake.
standard. Okay, so what's the standard for shuffling dice in your opinion?
So for rolling dice, you keep an eye out for things that look very metered and measured. When you see one roll, it's difficult, but if you
Hmm.
know if they have a very specific movement, if it's not a random movement, if it's not a random thing, if it looks very specific, if it looks very practiced, that's kind of the what you've got to notice, and it's very hard to notice.
Yeah,
But
I don't even know what a
we're
practice
talking
roll
about
looks
we're
like.
talking about us. Yeah, usually from what I've seen, most the easiest one is looks like this. So it's because they're trying to control rotational force and they're trying to only get one
Okay,
axis of rotation.
so when they're just dropping it out of their
So
hand?
yeah. But that being said, it's a small area, so people might be doing that just to be considerate of the players to either side. So it's difficult. Yeah. And
Well,
I,
for
I
me,
agree
something that
with
looks pretty random
Fox.
is when you're shaking into your hand and you just sort of let it loose on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, like the shaking doesn't matter. So that's a 6. I'm going to shake this violently and it's
Yeah.
still a 6, right? So I can hold this dice in such a way that it doesn't move in my hand and make it an act like I'm randomizing it.
Well, I mean, if
Um,
there's two dice, it'd be hard to fool me. I mean, because like if you have two dice, I should be able to hear the shaking, the rattling of the dice, unless you can fake that as
yeah.
well.
Oh yeah. Well, we're only rolling one dice to go first. If it's two, I can fake it as well. And
Hmm.
one is always a 6 because I'm pinning one. The other one is free to clack around, and it sounds just like us.
So, okay, I get it. So like one of these dice will fall down high no matter what. Then
Yeah.
do you not see
And
this
now
as
I'm
a
7 to
problem?
12.
If we because according to Wizards of
I
the
do.
Coast, we're going to
Yeah.
be using D20s over spin downs for
Yeah.
these Forgotten Realms cards. So if they don't think that a spin down is fair or will not be used fairly, I am just this immediately set a red flag off in my head about
No,
how this is being used to determine a die roll,
no,
and how
I
long.
don't think Wizards. I think Wizards is just having fun. I don't
Oh,
I
you.
don't feel that they're when we see their ads, I don't. They're saying, "Oh, that's not a spin down. That's not a D20." I don't think that they're talking to competitive players. I think
Oh,
they're
okay. So
just
this is just a
having a little bit
branding
of fun.
thing.
Yeah, they're saying that this is a special thing that D&D players use that we don't use. It's something new and exciting. I think they're just
Okay,
they're
okay.
just having a good time. I don't think that they're making an argument that this is an instrument of precision. Uh,
All
I'm
right.
a I'm a level 1. I'm just a little guy.
Hey, judge is a judge. I'm a control player. Please help my soul. I'm sorry, there's no help. You're a control player for life. There's nothing we can do. Okay, MTG Ectoplasm asks, should I purchase a dice tower to protect myself from cheaters? And is it legal to use at an MTG event?
Yeah, so a dice tower absolutely increases your deflective forces on a dice. They're fun to use. My complaint with them is that they're large and they take up a lot of space. Um, which at these events we don't have as much space. I think the best solution is a dice cup, which keeps your hands off the dice, puts it in an area, and you can make sure that it's being rolled properly.
Uh-huh.
And
Interesting.
it
These are
adds movement.
fancy. This is nice. I
Yeah,
just want to own this for the sake of owning this.
yeah. So they are neat. They're kind of like the carrot and
60
stick thing.
$64. I don't know anymore, but it's not very nice looking.
It it also increases the time it takes to roll, and if we're in a match, it may not seem like a lot, but you're going to get sick of waiting for a dice to roll down a dice tower.
Is it really long?
It's not even a second longer, but my argument is that that'll add up to you, and you'll start to just roll the dice.
T minus. We're gonna wait. I can envision people bringing the dice towers and putting them on top of their deck boxes.
Yeah.
All right, sweet, interesting. Maybe dice towers. Ryan Harris, is opponent allowed to shuffle your deck when you present it, or should it only be a cut? Oh, this might be in response to okay. Here's okay. Well, this is an interesting thing. Because after a few cheating videos I've released, a lot of people, especially Yu-Gi-Oh players, because I think in Yu-Gi-Oh you present your deck to your opponent, they shuffle it, then you get as a player the final cut. And now a lot of people are asking,
Used to
is
be
it?
like that in Magic.
Oh, it used to be. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. How far back did that go? Because a lot of people said, "Didn't we do this in Magic?" I'm said, "No, this
I
is not
want
the rules."
I want to say
But
post 10th edition. It was close to the 10th edition
okay,
that changed. I know during 10th edition that was the thing. If you shuffled your deck, I was allowed to cut it.
yep.
If I cut it, you were allowed to shuffle it, and it created cycles where you shuffle, I cut. You don't like my cut, so you shuffle again, I cut.
So you keep doing it
So
until everyone is
yeah,
sufficiently happy.
my argument is that if you do that more than twice, you should be calling a judge, because it's your responsibility. If you think something is suspicious enough to pause the game like that, call a judge and figure it out.
So one thing that's really important that people don't understand is one of the most common cheats out there, and it happens a lot. I don't think people even realize how big this is mana weaving. Mana weaving is one of the most common cheats that people don't even realize that they're cheating. It's where you evenly distribute all the lands and spells in your deck so that it's even. And in a lot of players' mind, they think it's random. That is true. That is not random. You've put your deck in a complete pattern. So when you present your deck to the opponent, if they only cut it, they haven't randomized your deck. It's still in the pattern of like one land, two spells, one land, two spells, one land, two spells. So they never have to mulligan. They're going to have a perfect distribution of threats and mana. This if you read people complaining about the arena shuffler, it reveals how many people are cheating like this. They said, this never happens to me in FNM because I always distribute my deck like evenly with lands and spells to make sure it never happens. And you have to shuffle your opponent's decks because of those players. This is it's way more common than you would think. It's not super blown up because, in my opinion, these people play terribly anyway, so they're never in a position of winning a tournament, and they're never inspected for such. But that's why we let people shuffle the deck. But maybe other reasons why it's important to shuffle.
Yeah, so that's the big one is dealing with deck homogeneity, right? Cutting just specifically says I am confident that every portion of this deck is randomized, not just the top, or not just the bottom, or not just the middle. I'm saying I'm randomly taking a section, and I'm confident that any peel off of that deck is a random event. But if I've homogenized the distribution of my deck, then I'm confident that every part of my deck is a setup, is a cheated draw.
Yeah, exactly. Part of genuine randomness will have distributions like 6 lands and 1 spell, or 6 spells, 1 land.
But like you said,
random.
This is kind of the realm of lower powered decks, so the kind of weird jank that I play would benefit from this. But high tier professional decks are hit a level of consistency that doesn't require mana weaving.
Good point. D Canadian Bacon. So we need to force people to roll with a certain technique, such as cupping a D20 in 2 hands, shake for 2 seconds, and roll. What would you say is sufficient for rolling a D20 if you don't have a dice tower?
So it's really just got to be randomness. You've got to. There's 2 points. One is when they pick it up. I picked up this dice. I don't know where it is, and I don't know which face is facing my hand. I don't know which face is facing out. If I look at it, pick it up, that's a red flag. If I look at it, turn it, and then pick it up, that's a huge red flag.
Ooh,
So
I like what we're learning here.
the aspect is how I engage the dice and how I release the dice are the important parts. Because if I load these dice into my hand, I can shake all day. I can even clack them together, and they're still high numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that's 6 and a 5. I'm going to win that dice roll. So it's the important part, much like a magician, is that there can be a lot of chaos in between, but the important part is when I engage the dice and when I release the dice. That's when cheats happen, and that's where you have to kind of watch. Now, not to be that guy that's calling wolf. I got to look at the table to find my dice. So just looking at a dice isn't admission of cheating. But if I'm really inspecting it, or if I'm really deliberate with how I pick it up, I'm real deliberate with how I drop it, that might be a red flag to look at. And if you're sure, if you feel in your bones that someone's cheating, just call a judge. Even at a FNM, there's going to be a judge there, and you can say, hey, there's something fishy going on here. Can we take a look?
Well, could you say that up front, or would it be best to say it behind the opponent? Like, I got to talk to you away from the table so that they can look themselves and investigate on future rounds.
I would too, because this is still a recreational thing, especially at an FNM. These are still my friends. I don't want to be that guy that's like super competitive at a casual event. It's the problem with dice, and the problem with kind of judging on this is the fact that, like what he said, only if you roll high, is that if you shuffle your deck and I call a judge and I can say, I don't think he is adequately randomizing his deck, I'm unbiased, and I come from a position of ethical security, because I don't know what your top card is. I don't know if it's good, or I don't know if it's bad. I just think by your method, that's not an appropriate way to shuffle your deck. I don't feel that that's good enough. But when you roll a dice and it comes up a 20, I'm going to be like, judge, oh, you didn't roll the dice properly. You roll a dice, comes up 1. I'm going to be like, oh, fine, great roll, fantastic, perfectly random. The problem is that we can see the result before we can judge. We have time to judge if the method is proper, which is why it's so difficult. Yeah.
Let's go look at some questions. Drew Smith says, isn't a simple solution to the air bubbles or improper weighting to just have both players roll the same dice? Well, it doesn't work with the D&D cards, though, because the D&D cards doesn't care. Well, it doesn't care about the die roll to determine who goes first, but it'll determine winning.
I like that for going first, right? I roll this dice, you pick up this dice and roll it.
Well, we have to. There's no. I've never rolled a separate die from my opponent.
Yeah, I quite like that system. A lot of D&D players are really touchy about you rolling their dice, but this is Magic. This is not D&D.
Don't you touch my die? This is my die.
We have different conventions. Die. Yeah,
I see.
And it is like this is a handmade carved walnut case for a bunch of pieces of plastic that cost $1. So like D&D players are kind of touchy about dice for strange superstitious reasons. But this is Magic. Yeah. We gotta kind of have different standards.
It's funny. There's not as many superstitious players in Magic the Gathering for a game with so much chance involved. Chris Ross with a super chat. My girlfriend and I went on a trip and found a shop, so we bought a Modern Horizons 2 box. Half of the packs had no rares. Reviews mentioned possible resealing by singles people. All right, so Chris Ross just giving a heads up to people.
I posted on Twitter, I bought a 3-pack from a big box store of Time Spiral Remastered right when it was all sold out everywhere. And the box was like really messed up. I'm like, I know this is a repack, but I want it to like examine the glue they used. And I'm not sure if it was a repack, it was done very well. But I think it was like $4 worth of cards out of 3-packs. Like all the rares were terrible. But I wanted to see how good they are at doing it.
And what
Don't do that.
He found a shop. I heard this is like more of a bigger problem with like Walmart and Amazon because they don't understand these products. They don't even know if repacks are possible. So like when you return it, they're like, "Oh, okay, it's
Yeah,
returned. Who cares? No big deal, even if the plastic's off of it or whatever."
there's
But
cards
when
in
it
here.
comes,
You're selling
yeah,
cards.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. There's cards, no big deal. Then they just resell it to somebody else. But when it comes to a local game store and you try to do that, they're like, okay, come on, like
yeah.
we know what you've done here. And they understand the danger, the magnitude of the situation. So I'm very surprised that happened at just some random shop. I thought that would be the risk would be much more higher from buying from Walmart or Amazon. Fraser, but won't using the same dice not fix anything since presumably only one of them knows how to take advantage of the the cheat dice? Same dice. Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, if you know how to roll the dice, yeah, it doesn't matter who's rolling the dice. That's why we're sort of learning here. I never thought about someone trying to take advantage of the die roll up until this D20 thing came about. I never thought about it, and now I'm gonna look for it.
Yeah.
You don't know how. I can only catch the cheats I know about. Everything else, it's impossible. So now I'm gonna be paying more attention to people's die rolls.
And I think Magic players will get very good at spotting these because
Mm-hmm.
Magic players are really good at spotting sleight of hand card tricks. So it's just a matter of time before you can see a dice roll and think, oh, not today, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else do we got here?
So someone asked about the process of becoming a judge, and I just want to quickly say that
Sure.
the first step is to so you go on the Judge Academy website and create a profile. You can start doing modules and start training. It's like a university course, but the most important step is to find a level 2 that will endorse you. They'll give you an interview, they'll give you an endorsement, and they'll help you along the path. And it's built to be based on that mentor mentee situation.
Welcome to Judge Academy.
So your first step is to find a level 2 or a level 3 that will help you out, and they'll tell you everything you need to know.
I'm assuming level 2 is a lot easier to find than level 3. Or isn't there
Yeah,
like a small handful of level 3s on the earth?
yeah, yeah. I agree.
Level 2s, they're a little bit everywhere. A lot of level 2s in Calgary?
There is actually quite a few. I got a mentor quite quickly, but I know there's other people in different places in Western Canada that are looking and screaming into the void looking for one.
I know we have a lot of level 2s here in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Thank God, because I have a lot of judge questions I constantly ask them. Um, There's someone who asked about a corgi shuffle. I mean, I've never seen. Do you know what? I guess no, we can't corgi shuffle. Or like the way they described it, it was like washing the cards at a casino. And I
Mm.
think the problem with that is that you're gonna box your cards.
There
Um,
there was a player I watched during a pro tour. He was on camera, and he this is back in the day when Magic Online was kind of an alternate route to the pro tour, and he'd never played paper Magic. He
mhm,
only played Magic Online, got into the pro tour, and then before the pro tour started, went out and purchased the cards that he'd never owned a Magic card before. And you
mhm,
see images of him, and he's doing the the mash shuffle, like the swish shuffle, because he just has no hand skills, no card skills. I've seen a couple of instances where he called a judge and he said, this is weird, but could you shuffle my cards? I never played card games before. I don't know how to shuffle cards. And it's funny, but the guy did very well. He's very good at Magic, way better at Magic than me. And yeah, it takes a lot to admit what you're not good at, and it takes a lot to notice that shuffling cards is a card skill that we've all developed just out of habit. It's not a free thing that people can just do.
No, yeah, like people don't know how, there is a way of learning. I should have made a video about this already because I had to teach Andrew day 2 Dryden. I tell him stop looking at the damn deck while you're shuffling because like if you don't know how to shuffle the cards properly, you have no choice but except to like basically look at the deck as you're shuffling it. Um and then but with some instruction, you can teach people how to shuffle without like staring at the cards.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Keith asks, could Hogak be unbanned with a graveyard hate of Dothy, Voidwalker, and Endurance in Modern Horizons 2? Should we roll a d20 to determine if it stays banned? I hate Hogak. We're definitely not unbanning Hogak. That's not happening. You can have infinite answers. It doesn't matter. You need to draw what ends up happening in Hogak decks is you're gonna mulligan to 5 just to try to beat Hogak, and they might not even play Hogak. And if they do play and they might still play Hogak, and then like, what are you gonna do with your Endurance? It's pointless at that point. And should we roll a d20 to determine if it stays banned? Oh no! Oh, I got it. You're just kidding here.
Under 10 stays banned. I got a 4.
Yeah. Tyler
This
Roberts.
dice only has 1 to 0 twice, so.
Isn't that legal to seed it as long as you shuffle at least 7 times after 7 meeting true random mark? Wait, you're talking about randomness in or what is considered random, because as I understand in the rules, well, technically true, you need to shuffle 7 times to make the deck truly random. Almost no one does it because it's just not practical. It takes forever to shuffle 7 times. So in the rules, we're not asked to make the deck truly random. We are trying to make the order of the deck to such a case that we don't know where the cards are anymore. That's as I understand it.
So I do want to say that the 7 count is an actual mathematical theorem, but it's based off of a 52 card deck because it's based on a deck of playing cards. Our numbers with a 60 card deck is going to be different.
Yeah,
but it's a fair, assumption. In my opinion, that seeding, sorting, anything. I come to an event sorted, so I think I just played a game, but like these decks are absolutely sorted when I have them, just because that's how I build them. Any shuffling procedure, if it's worth doing, should be able to take a deck that's completely sorted and turn it into a random deck. So I should be able to go from Goblin Guide's the first card, Mountain is the last card, and I do whatever I do to shuffle, and that should be a completely randomized thing. So my argument is that I think everybody should shuffle longer and more vigorously.
Then we need less fetch lands in our formats.
Yeah. So it's kind of a big problem, but I think that the resistance to shuffling, or the resistance to cutting, the resistance to doing these things, just makes it take longer. People don't like shuffling, so they kind of resist shuffling. They shuffle, and it just makes everything take longer. Just do it as fast as you can, as vigorously as you can for enough time, and we'll all forget that a year of our life has been wasted by the time we all retire Magic.
Yeah. James Gilberto asks, I table shuffle my deck into 6 random piles of 10, then shuffle all those piles together. Sounds great. What do you think? That sounds good?
Yeah, I do too. I do it, but I will say that it doesn't do anything. If your actual shuffling theory should be able to randomize a sorted pile or a pile shuffled pile. So it shouldn't do anything. And if you're genuinely shuffling, that should be a pointless thing. But I'm not going to criticize you, because I do that. At the beginning of the event, I pile shuffle and then I shuffle. So it just makes me feel good.
I pile shuffle just to count my deck.
Yeah, that's
60 cards.
And in the rules, that's the only reason you're allowed to. You're not allowed to do more than 1 pile shuffle, because it's meant for a deck count, not necessarily a valid form of randomization.
I have a question for you. Am I allowed, because I've been in this situation and I got a warning, and then I can understand my warning completely, but so I pile shuffle my deck. I got 59 cards. Where's my last card? Or no, sorry, no. I pile shuffle my deck. I got 59 cards. So I pile shuffle it again to make sure, because hey, did I screw up somewhere? Now by the time I've done that the second time, am I in trouble? Or should I, after the first time, I should just individually count my cards instead of physically pile shuffling? Because essentially, I'm not trying to shuffle the deck. I'm just trying to count it. But I counted 59. I mean, I got to count it again.
Yeah,
I made a mistake.
I wouldn't hold that against you. I think that rule's in place to prevent you from wasting time. Yeah. To say that this is, and to drive home the fact that this is not an adequate form of randomization. The biggest problem is that you got a deck with 59 cards. So here's a basic island for you, is how that would work in a casual REL.
Well, I was playing for top 8 of a GP, so it was pretty important.
Vigorously.
Yes, that's right. Fox asks, so am I now going to get called a cheater when I roll quick? No, not necessarily roll. No, you might get called a cheater if you roll slowly. Like if you
Yeah, and
like
that's
take your
and
time to set it up and then you seem to have some sort of secret magic method to always getting high die rolls. Well, okay, maybe now on to this. Is it I'm now all of a sudden paranoid about people asking to go like odd and even because if I let's say I ask you, hey, do you want to go
always.
odd or even, and you say odd, I could pick up a certain loaded die that will just give me even because I just ask you first before I pick up the die, and I have another die that's also loaded for odd.
Always. Yeah. I've always been I've done and people pick up like 9 dice and they're like, oh, this is a game, I'm going to teach you, this is how we do. I'm like, no, how about I'm going to roll these dice, and whoever rolls, you're going to roll the same dice, and whoever gets the highest wins.
We're gonna play
I,
that game, the old-fashioned game.
I've had a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, my next door neighbor. He was in a tournament. It was relatively competitive. He rolled a d20, and his opponent rolled, and then got like a much lower roll and started going first. And he's like, no. I said I wanted to go first. He's like, yeah, but I won. We were doing low roll. And he's like, aha, that's very funny. And he's like, no, I'm dead serious. I thought we were doing low roll. And he's like, who on earth would do low roll? But if you don't specify the parameters of a roll, that's so I say I'm going to roll these dice. You are going to roll these dice. Whoever rolls the highest on these dice will choose to go first or second.
Yeah.
And it makes me sound like a psycho robot, but I've taken to sounding like a psycho robot at the beginning of every Magic game that I care about.
And it must be played fairly. Did we go for this question? I hope I didn't miss it. Fraser T, but won't using the same dice not fix anything? Oh yeah, okay, we did because
yeah. It'll fix a bias dice. So the unskilled cheats where I've done float tests, I've figured out, or just from experience, I know this dice rolls good. It'll fix that. So
how easy is it to find a bias die out of a bunch of random spin downs?
The question you should ask is how hard is it to find an unbiased die? And I would argue impossible. All dice manufactured.
Oh, so they're all biased a little bit, huh? Oh, interesting.
Even these, which are precision milled for people to gamble with, will have a bias.
Interesting. But they change the dice so often, so you'll never accumulate you'll never discover the bias.
Yeah,
so they do it in casinos.
And they make you roll very vigorously, because in a casino you've got to cast a certain distance, and not only does it have to hit the base, but it's got to hit a textured backboard.
Yeah, so you have to hit the backboard. Yeah.
Once again, the key to overcoming these biases is to add forces that overcome them, i.e., using vigorous rolls to overcome the biases inherent in the dice.
Right. John Flagg asks, my brother started playing Modern and he's having a very hard time shuffling and double sleeve cards. This is second nature to me. Any tips? I don't have a deck to shuffle. I mean, you could, okay, if the whole deck for some reason is too much, you can split it up into 2 decks and then shuffle it into piles, and then start taking pieces of the other decks, shuffling it up just to practice until you probably can get the whole deck. I would have to see what their problem is, but I usually I have the deck in my hands. I'll take one part out. I hold it pretty loosely. Like, you got to hold the deck loosely, because when the top part cuts in and you want to cut it in through a corner, you take the bottom corner of the card, cut it into the chunk of deck you're holding into your hand, and then you just loosely just sort of push it in against each other. The idea is you got to be a little loose, because if you're holding everything tight, it's not going to work. The 2 piles don't force themselves into each other at all.
I would look at doing thinner sleeves as well. So like a dragon shield will be super thick. I use KMCs, which are very thin outer sleeve, so it helps. If the problem is that it's just too big of a unit to shuffle, you can switch. So this is a double sleeve KMC, and it's relatively thin, I would say.
Are KMCs good again?
Yeah, oh yeah. I've got an entire fat pack box of KMCs. I buy them by the case.
Oh, it sounds like that's what I got to do. I love the KMCs. They were so good, and then they went to absolute garbage, and the whole world knew about it. And then my local game store hasn't ordered KMCs ever since. So I got to know where I can get a case.
In my opinion, they're good again. Yeah,
they're good again. They went back to the old formula.
They are less durable. Like I keep in mind, I'm an enthusiast, so like every big event, I switch my sleeves. I switch
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
sleeves
Me
when
too.
they don't look nice anymore. So when they're brand new, they can't be beat, but they just don't stay brand new for very long.
Okay, well, now we're going to take it a step above. That's interesting that we have these super chats one back to back. How do we shuffle a double sleeve deck? How do we shuffle an EDH deck? Or a
Oh,
proper way to shuffle?
I have no idea. I'm terrible at shuffling EDH decks. I pile shuffle it. So I take the deck, I cut it, I take two piles shuffle, put it on top, two piles shuffle, and I do
Yeah,
that
I
multiple times.
basically
And
do
it
that.
takes
I split it up into like 3 chunks and shuffle those things, and then I take chunks from the chunks and shuffle, and hopefully that's good enough. There's no table judge gonna call you on
I've
misrandomizing your
I've seen
deck.
the Canlander players, and they have like big double sleeved like vintage decks, and they're like riffle shuffling their giant decks.
Oh
There's like black.
God.
There's like a Black Lotus in these Canlander decks, and
Yeah,
there's guys like right. So I respect that, but I don't know if I'd be doing it.
they're old fashioned.
Yeah,
That's super old style. I don't see the riffle shuffle anymore. I don't see anyone doing that anymore.
I do it.
It should be oh god. The,
Yeah,
the, the little
I got
creases at the top of all of your cards.
yeah, I got 8 Cavern of Souls. Well, they're double sleeves, so it doesn't do that much damage to them. But
Really?
yeah,
I don't remember double sleeving my decks way back in the day, like when I was playing around the year 2000. But I did single sleeve, and I had time, like, cause I was a huge riffle shuffler, and all my cards were creased at the top,
yeah.
or at least a lot of them.
So double sleeving makes it stiffer, so there's less of a bend to the cards. There's more of a
Yeah.
clackety click. So I
Okay.
find that double sleeving protects against not just the edge wear, but it protects against the bending. Don't get
Interesting.
me wrong. If you're not, nobody say, hey, I got a
Well,
foil Misty Rainforest that's trash now because that judge told me to shuffle.
yeah, I could practice some with some draft deck. Steve asks, KMC was the best. Turn to garbage, but KMC USA sleeves are just like they used to be.
Yeah.
KMC is the best sleeves in my opinion. I really enjoyed the texture. I use Dragon Shields now, very durable. They work with my KMC perfect size inner sleeves, but the texture on the back sucks. I'm
Yeah.
not a fan of the texture like at all. It's rough. Can you hear the roughness, people? Like you can hear that, and I can feel that, and I'm not thrilled. Whatever. I go with them because the sleeves work, but I'd love to go back to KMC. I'm gonna
They're
go
built
find
like
my see how I
tanks,
can get a.
though.
Hmm.
They're built like tanks, though.
They are built like tanks. Like yeah, these sleeves are very worn. I'm shuffling them, and can people see how worn they are? They're pretty worn. I mean, I'd have to replace them at this point, but they don't die. They haven't died on me, and I shuffle these cards constantly every day. Javier with the super chat. Nikachu, I saw the video how people played in the 90s, and I saw people playing cards without sleeves. I want to pull my hair. That's right. It used to be like that. To add to it, people mentioned in the comments section that back then for the feature table, they didn't get coverage quite right, and that there was too much glare, so they asked people to de-sleeve the cards. There was a time where sleeves didn't exist, but then there was a time where sleeves started to exist, but then they still asked people to de-sleeve their deck for feature matches.
I have a good friend that for years, until like 2 years ago, he played unsleeved, and he had some super premium modern decks just unsleeved, all ripped to shreds. He's like,
Look at these super chats today, millions. I cut the deck in half, shuffle both like modern decks. Gotcha. On how to shuffle the EDH decks. For EDH, I cut deck into thirds, then I shuffle 2 parts like I would a modern deck. But after every shuffle, I put down 1 part and pick up the other part. Okay, so before we go into Decklist review, is there any other info you'd like to share with us about dice? Maybe some miscellaneous stuff that we didn't cover?
yeah, not my main take home is that yes, Magic players' criticisms that spin downs are unfair are accurate, but the problem is every dice is unfair. That's the main take home, and I think dice cheaters are very rare. It's a less common skill set than card cheating. So we probably shouldn't worry about it, but I think we got to go through this to have the knowledge to be able to detect and make sure that everything's fair.
Sadly, some videos like this might help promote the cheating. People realize, oh, I can cheat with the dice? Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Let's go to it. Well, anyway, so we got to promote Wizards. And I don't know why it would be so complicated for Wizards. Wizards should put in their program, like automatically pairing people before the round.
Yeah,
And
I've heard that argument, and I can't kind of disagree that it wouldn't be viable, but you know, I like rolling dice.
well, A-Hoax asks, tournament ruling on naming effects, Pithing Needle. Does the player need to give the exact name, or can they just hint at the functions of the card?
So that was a change a while ago with the Borborygmos scandal.
Oh, that's got to be a good video. Oh, I'm putting
Yeah,
that down. I'm
you
running.
should
We're
do
gonna
it.
go back. We're going back to Borgor history of Magic rule changes.
A player had to name a card, played a Meddling Mage, and he named Borborygmos, and his opponent was like, yeah. 2 turns later, he plays Borborygmos Enraged.
Yeah.
And the guy calls the judge, says, I got a Meddling Mage for Borborygmos. And the guy says, no, you've got a Meddling Mage for Borborygmos. And that's a legal card in this format.
How do I spell that? Bor.
So
Bor. Yeah, here we got both of them here.
So they've changed it that we just have to understand, right? I can say I can play my Meddling Mage, and I can say to Nikachu, I want to name that that Merfolk god that makes everything indestructible. And he can be like, yeah. And that is now a valid declaration of Spellbinder.
Yeah. I named this. No, you didn't. You named this. It's quite a bit different. This card exists.
Shortly after that, the official rules were changed to take into account. I call it the Borborygmos scandal, but
that's going to be. You know what? I thought it was a Pithing Needle. I didn't know it was a Meddling Mage. But I think there's an actual.
I think it was Meddling Mage, yeah. But I'm not.
Well, I'm going to trust you. I don't really know for sure. I just know that it changed. This changed how we use Meddling Mage. Sorry, it's changed how we use Pithing Needle and Meddling Mage. I think there was some video footage of that as well, which will make for a very good video. Yeah. Ryan Harris said
it's not as good as the Pithing Needle fetch land debacle, but
what was that?
So a player plays or he calls a judge, and he's like I can name. It was something without an activated ability.
Oh, it was like Birds of Paradise.
I can name this, right? And the judge is like, yes, you can name this, because it would be illegal for them to say, yeah, but you shouldn't. They'd be like, yes, you can name it. Yeah. And he's like, okay. And then he plays Pithing Needle. And the guy's like, okay. And then as it lands, because you have to determine what you're going to do, your response before it lands. Mm-hmm. It lands, and he names Polluted Delta and bricks 3 of his fetch lands.
So he was asking about an alternate card from the judge?
Yeah. He's like.
Oh, I never heard of that one. That is great.
It was Bob. He calls a judge. He's like, can I name Bob with this? And the judge says yes. He's like, okay.
What a move.
The guy's like, no response, because he knows that if he names Bob, it won't do anything, because it's not an activated
Polluted Delta.
And then it lands, and he's like, Polluted Delta, and the guy's got 3 uncracked Polluted Deltas, completely bricks his entire mana base. It was fantastic. This is the kind of I love it, which is why I'm kind of sad that they're making the game more about the game and not the silly shenanigans that you can get to.
I heard an alternate story. There's a Birds of Paradise in play. And of course, you can't Pithing Needle Birds of Paradise, but the guy goes to a judge away from the table, and he's like, yeah, I can do that, right? Yeah, I can do that. Excellent. Pithing Needle, name Birds of Paradise. And then the guy just didn't tap the Birds of Paradise, apparently, for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Because it got so much confirmation from the body language of the player in connection with the judge.
To be clear, you can do it. You can name whatever you want. You can name Elite Vanguard.
Yeah, exactly.
If you name Birds of Paradise, I can still tap it for mana, but Pithing Needle can name Birds of Paradise. Pithing Needle can name any card.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here's an interesting question from Javier Morgan. Judge, sir, what about weighted dice like the metal dice? Are they allowed?
So metal dice, when you say weighted, I'm assuming
you're
not meaning
heavy,
cheating
I
dice. I generally don't like metal dice. I love metal dice as an object. I don't think that they're any better for weight distribution than acrylic. In fact, I think they're worse for weight distribution. A lot of other natural things. My issue for them is that they don't really feel nice to roll, right? Like they hit the table really hard and they make a big sound. If you enjoy that, if that's a visceral experience, I think go for them. Just stay away from my Cavern of Souls. Stay away from my precious goblin guides. If you're gonna be throwing them caltrops around.
Yeah, they're damaging.
Yeah, I think that they're just as bad as any other option.
Spencer Ward with the super chat.
Nice.
Speaking of bent rule scandals, what's your opinion on the Dryad Arbor? Was Gabriel Nassif in the right? Are you familiar with this?
This is a story I don't know. Yeah.
Dryad Arbor. How do I remember this correctly? Maybe I don't know it correctly, but there was a Dryad Arbor mixed in with a bunch of lands, and Nassif didn't realize there was a Dryad Arbor there, and then made a turn that basically got himself blown out because a Dryad Arbor randomly blocked him, and then he lost. I think that's how the case. If anyone remembers it differently or could clear up exactly what happened, maybe I can find. Well, I can't play audio while in this. Does anyone remember the scandal very well? Isn't one dice just called a die? Dryad Arbor was in a lands pile instead of not being in the lands. Was in the lands pile. You mean like not being in the creatures pile? That's pretty much it. Basically hiding Arbor in your lands rather than up front with your creatures. Well, but it's a thing. It's a dual thing. It taps for mana and it's a creature at the same time. So technically, what takes precedent? You know.
So I think they've changed it. Technically, you have to have a clear board state, and you have the right to say, could you clear up your board state? And now there is specific zones that you have to put things in. I think Dryad Arbor does have to go with creatures.
So, like, if you have a creature that's also a land, it must be in the creatures pile over the lands pile?
I believe so.
Because the thing is, okay, I understand that if you want the thing is, like, how do you know when you need clarification of the board state?
Yeah.
You know, because you already don't know that there's an Arbor Elf hiding in your opponent's land pile.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to evaluate a state and say, if I don't know 100% what my opponent has over there, I need to ask him to clear it up. And you come off as that guy when it's like, could you straighten up your cards, right? Yeah. But if it's an important game, you just kind of have to be that guy from time to time. I knew a guy, I used way back in the day, I played a guy, and he was very good. He had a very photographic memory, and he would play all of his cards in a pile. So Forest, Birds of Paradise, this card, this card, this card. And if it was up to him, he'd just have a stack of face-up cards in front of him. He'd remember exactly what's in that stack.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't.
It's awful.
They didn't have the gravel to be like, what are you doing? Don't do that.
Right.
And he would, if you asked him, he'd be like, oh, of course. But he won a lot of games based on the fact that people just didn't have the grit to be like, you're insane. Could you please lay out your cards?
Right. Don't worry, I'll buy you a playset, sir. I'm not sure exactly what that's in reference to, but thank you very much for the super chat, Javier. I would say, I mean, now I guess you have to have your Arbor Elf with a pile of creatures, but I would just say, because it's a mana source, I'd feel more comfortable being in the lands pile, but it has to be by itself, not touching another land. It's got to be clearly a creature independent of, or a land independent of all the other lands that I have on the battlefield. But either way, the rules now, creature got to be up front.
I play elves and paupers, so half of my creatures are just piled up with my lands anyway. I'm never going to attack with them.
Right. They're all mana sources. Steven!
I shouldn't do that.
The judge saying, I shouldn't do that, but I like doing that. It just makes things easier. Can you get him to explain why the rules work the way they do around the Dryad of the Elysian Grove interaction that drives you crazy? Oh, yeah, the layering. Okay, are you familiar with Dryad of the Elysian Grove and For example, and removing its abilities with Merfolk Trickster. I know the
Um,
end result. I'm always fuzzy about why the rules work with the layerings.
good friend of mine plays Merfolk, so I'm familiar with Merfolk Trickster. So
Excellent.
what's the interaction? What do
Okay,
we?
so there's a Dryad of the Elysian Grove on the battlefield. It adds, and what's important is when they start playing Valakuts,
Yeah,
they start blowing up my board because all the random lands are mountains
yeah.
that they have. But when I Merfolk Trickster it to remove all its abilities, it does not remove the ability. Well, it removes all the abilities, but the effect of all their lands are all land types remains. It does not change despite trickstering the creature. Um,
Yeah.
and that's that.
That is that. Yeah, that is counterintuitive. I would have if you would have called me over in FNM, I would have missed that. I would have been like, yeah, you win. I kind of get it in that it's a layering issue. It's a typesetting issue.
Yeah. Whatever.
Um,
We need a level 2 judge. This is what the
yeah,
level
that's
twos pass the
that's a
course for.
level 2 stuff. Yeah,
We're gonna get a
I
level
can
2. If you're a level 2 out there, you contact Nikachu. We're gonna have a Ask the Judge Coffee and MTG.
I can
Or
tell you
level
the power
3.
of
I take
toughness
level
with
3s
creatures.
too. Or level 4. Is there level 4s out there?
I'm not qualified to explain why my blood moons work. They just work.
We've got Daniel. Just wants to give a super chat. No problem. Thank you very much for the super chat. And Fraser T. It was from the Vault Arbor that looked like a literal forest. Yeah, but like, you know what? Nassif knows what these cards look like. I know what the From the Vault Arbor Elf looks like.
That's a bigger argument, and that goes
Or
back
sorry,
to
not
what we were
Arbor Elf. It's Dryad Arbor.
that goes to what we were talking about Pithing Needle and Borborygos and all these things is where do the rules where do we want the rules to sit? Do we want the game to be about the game, or do we want the game to be about the playing? Um, I kind of really like all these stories. We're still years later, we're still talking about these stories. So I think that they have value and they create a fun mythology of Magic. But I can see why people would be frustrated with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, creates a history for why we changed the
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah, I
It's
know. I know people hate this specific printing of the card because it
mhm.
looks just like a forest.
I think the deal is we're wiping away these rules because it's in some way against the spirit of the game when this Dryad Arbor is in combination with a bunch of other forests that look very similar in art. You can, especially if you just didn't announce it as Dryad Arbor for your land drop for the turn, you can just assume this is just another forest,
Yeah.
um, or at least from the opponent's side, and yeah, just completely forget that it's a creature. So I think Magic is trying to wipe away all the feel bad moments in the rules. Like they're trying to discourage as many feel bad moments as possible.
I agree. But in universe, isn't that the point of the Dryad Arbor? That you're walking through it and you can't tell that it's alive, and then it suddenly attacks you. Isn't
Oh,
that
it's so it's flavorful that it
yeah?
screws you over.
Isn't it flavorful that you get screwed?
It's true. It's gonna get you. It's gonna get you. Okay, D Canadian Bacon asks, how much of a nightmare is Garth One Eye's ability for card copies? Uh, and timing restrictions. My buddy and I had a hell of a time in Sealed with him. Do you have any opinions about this?
Yeah. So I haven't ever seen a Garth One Eye in person. It didn't come up in any of the packs that anyone I knew. Garth. Let's see. What is this? What does
This
this
is the
little
one
guy
that
say?
creates terrors and brain geysers and black
Yeah.
lotuses.
Yeah. Um. You know, theoretically, um, in most situations, it's going to produce, anything that it's going to function like other cards that we've seen before in most situations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in that it's the issue is that it's not creating a token, it's creating a copy, which is going to which could interact strangely with certain things. I honestly haven't looked that deeply into it, but I'm sure there
Yeah,
will be
hasn't come
certain
up in tournaments yet
interactions.
at all.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to wait and see on that one. can't even get to Decklist review. There's so many super chats. Jose Sunstrom. Don't know if this has been asked yet, but what is the most egregious cheating situation you have ever experienced as a judge?
So I'm a very new judge. I will say that I've been playing for decades and decades, but I'm a relatively new judge, and that was past year has been COVID. So um, I'm not a lot. The most egregious example of cheating has probably been deck stacking. The the funniest story I have. This was way before I was a judge. This was at an FNM. Is a mana weaving situation, but he had art sleeves, and all of his lands were this way, all of his cards were this way, and he would
So he boxed the cards.
and he'd mana weave his deck and then pass it to me to cut, and I would cut it. Don't do this. I did the wrong thing. This is an example of what you shouldn't do. I should have called the judge and said, "This is stack deck." But I cut all the cards this way in one pile, all the cards this way in the other pile, stacked them up. And he's like, "Oh, you can't do that." I'm like, "I can cut it however I want." and then he didn't tell me why I can't do it, because then he would say, "Oh, my deck is stacked." So he shuffled up, drew cards, mulliganed. He mulliganed down to one, and then said, "I'll play." And then he finally just scooped. And it's like, I'm not really looking to kind of give it to you. I just want you to kind of realize that you're kind of cheating here.
Yeah. You are cheating,
Yeah.
Try to realize that.
Yeah, but he obviously didn't know, because he didn't hide it. It was just so blatantly mana woven.
Because the thing is, they don't know it's cheating. Like, that's the problem. This is really common, and because they don't know, they just think that this is like something that they can get away with.
He did know, because he kept mulliganing. Like, he kept drawing and being like, and then he'd mulligan, and then mulligan. He knew, but he didn't admit like that. Because I know you've got either all lands or all cards. I don't care which. You've got one. So I think during the process he realized, oh, I'm actually cheating, and if I admit it, I'll be caught as cheating. I shouldn't have done that. I should have called a judge. A judge should have made a decision and been like, and taken him aside and been like, "Hey, this is actually cheating. I know you're not intending to be disingenuous or unfair, but you can't do this." And then I would have liked to think that he would have been like, "Okay," shuffled his deck, and we would have played a normal game. But
okay, so let's talk about this, because I'm not familiar with the rules about how we're allowed to shuffle, because I remember, this is going back 25 years. You were allowed to individually pile out the deck, especially at a time where when people weren't using sleeves. If the cards, you could take all the new looking cards, put them on one side, and all the old looking cards, put them on another side, and stack them on top of each other. Are you just flat out not allowed to do that right now?
Yeah. So any well, you're not allowed to field that deck, right? So any kind of deck that's not that's identifiable should be resleeved. That's the situation. And
it just didn't have sleeves on it at all.
Yeah, so I think there is a point in which judges can ask you to sleeve a deck if it's damaged, or
for sure
can ask you to switch out the cards.
Dude, I just want to be clear. So if I can identify marks on a deck, I'm not allowed to basically stack it in whatever way I want.
Yeah,
is that against the rules, or what is the procedure?
Yeah, so it all comes down to, do you know? Do you have any information whatsoever between card A and card B? And if the answer is yes, and you're manipulating that, you're now in violation.
Well, the deal would be, I don't, but I suspect maybe it does. So I'm putting all the mark stuff on one side and all the non-mark stuff on the other side.
So that's what I did way back in the day. That was against the rules. I shouldn't have been. I'm taking advantage of a stacked deck in the same way.
Really? So that might have been always against the rules, and
we're both
doing it.
We're both taking advantage of stacked decks. So that's why I'm not. This is not a competitive event. This is like a little game store, right? And we did it because it was, But in reality, you should call a judge. Like, if there's any information whatsoever, if you take advantage of it, you are now, even though you didn't stack the deck, you're taking advantage of a stacked deck. You're now cheating.
Okay, it's good to know, because I just remember people used to do that a long time ago to take advantage of people who didn't want to sleeve their decks. I just assumed it was part of the rules, but
it sucks. But it sucks, and it's kind of a nerdy way answer, and I know that a lot of people don't want to do it, but if there's any question, don't take advantage of it. Call a judge, get it sorted. That's
Right.
kind of, you know.
Excellent stuff. All right. Let's do some deck lists. Let's look at deck list review. You've seen deck list review, haven't you, Straw Boss? This guy's
all the
been in
time.
our chat a million times. He loves
All
our
the
chat.
time.
Do you have any? Do you have much more time?
Yeah.
Excellent. Plenty of time in Calgary. All right, everybody. Now is your time to submit your deck list. Go into my description. There is a link to my Discord. Join my Discord. And in my Discord, there is a channel called Decklist Review, and there you can submit your deck list with the command !review deck space. Give the URL to your deck list, and you'll be eligible at random to be chosen for deck list review.
You'll be proud of me. These cards are in my deck because of Decklist Review.
Oh, really? What is this? Oh, the Cleansing Wildfire.
Cleansing Wildfire, yeah.
People listen to Decklist Review.
Yeah.
It's useful feedback.
I haven't tested it because there hasn't been any in-person events.
You know, there's quite a few cards I bought. There was a few cards I bought early on in the pandemic, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm not buying any more cards until this pandemic is over. Who knows? Like, this card could get banned, or metagame can change like a million times between now and 2 or 3 years. I didn't know when, like...
The last event I played, it was Tron, Ad Nauseam, Tron.
Oh yeah, that's a completely different metagame now.
And I was building the deck. I'm like, my entire sideboard has to be anti-Tron, because if I can increase my win percentage against Tron, I'll be the world champion in no time, because all I play against is Tron.
Yeah. You'd be the Tron killer.
And now it's gone.
I mean, the deck to play is Infect. You just slaughter them. As is this channel. Quick shout out to our sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com. One-stop shop for all paper needs. Modern Horizons 2 single sealed product, but deal of the week this week, save up to 25% off all booster packs. Everything. Only useful for Canadians like myself and Morgan here from Calgary.
But if 25% is not enough for you.
Yeah, exactly. You know
you
what?
can use coupon
somehow
code
you need that
Nikachu
at exactly. Need that extra 5%. Somehow the 25%. You're getting more greedy. Don't worry, we've got you with the 5% coupon code from Fusion Gaming Online. And we're also going to thank Mana Traders, premier place to rent Magic cards online. Fair warning, card available issues. There are. Ragavan's tough to get. Urza Saga's tough to get. Mishra's Bauble tough to get. You can get them, but you have to refresh the page for like an hour, and then you'll get them. But outside of that, you can get all sorts of other decks that are also perfectly available between Eldrazi Tron, regular Tron, humans, Ad Nauseam, of course Merfolk. Don't forget Merfolk. Also spirits, MTG Ectoplasm, probably cheering on spirits. But you can also support the channel using my Mana Traders link in the description below, or save 15% off your first 2 months using coupon code Nikachu. All right, let's choose some deck lists. Using the command random, which is truly random. Okay, Warp Ninja. Congratulations, you're the next contestant. You got some modern D&T list. Do you play D&T at all?
Played against D&T.
There we go.
I play humans, so humans has some overlap with Death and Taxes.
Oh, true story. True story. All right, what do we got here? For creatures, we got 4 Thalia, 4 Stoneforge, 4 Skyclave, 2 Sanctum Prelate, 4 Leonin Arbiter, 4 Giver of Runes, 1 Flicker Wisp, and 2 Archon of Emeria. Just like fair warning, a lot of no one's playing Leonin Arbiter anymore. It sounds like it's getting pushed out of the format. Either searching your library doesn't matter anymore, or, you know, stone raining them with Ghost Quarter is not as important as it used to be. It's the decks aren't playing them anymore. Maybe we got to go back. I'm not sure, but Leonin Arbiter, I can tell you the trend of all the Death and Taxes players, they're scrapping it, and all new versions of Death and Taxes are trying to live without the Leonin Arbiter. 1 Sword of Fire and Ice.
Wizards are trying to upgrade Death and Taxes in the past couple sets, so we got, you know, Sanctum Prelate into Modern.
Yep.
So, you know, how old is this deck? We got any of that juicy new tech in here?
Oh, we have tons of new tech. I mean, like in the last 2 years, we have Stoneforge Mystic, Skyclave Apparition, Sanctum Prelate, Giver of Runes, Archon of Emeria, Cauldron Complete, Maul the Skyclaves, Batter Skull, thanks to Stoneforge Mystic. I mean, it's a brand new deck for the most part. It's like wiped away more than half the cards. So it is very, very, very different. You got some of these Horizon Lands. You probably should, I mean, it doesn't matter big time, but just to play around Pithing Needle, you should probably have 2 Sunbay Canyon, 2 Silent Clearing, because I don't think you use the black mana at all in this deck. So you might as well just have sufficiently different lands to play around Pithing Needle. 9 plains, 4 Ghost Quarter, 1 Flagstones, 4 Field of Ruin, and in Ijanjo Castle. Do you know how to pronounce this one?
Jano?
It's either Iganjo, Iganjo. I don't know.
The Castle thing. Hey, with the changes to Pithing Needle, I don't need to know how to pronounce it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, gotcha. 4 Path to Exile, 1 Winds of Abandon, another Sanctum Prelate, Sanctifier on Vac, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Phyrexian Revoker, 2 Mirran Crusader, another Flickerus, 2 Containment Priest, 2 Ariok Champion. The only I would only change the Leon if I were to change anything, I would only change the Leonin Arbiter. This is the card. I'm just saying from the Death and Taxes player's perspective, it's sort of phasing out. I guess it just doesn't do what it's meant to do. Like a lot of decks these days are super mana efficient. They're not fetching enough, and or there's just too much removal for it. So it's very unlikely that you Ghost Quarter them with this thing. Ganjo, yeah. I like that. Roger M here.
And I find that, you know, especially you watch Modern Mill, so the 8 Crab Mill. Mm-hmm. So many decks have a way to just not need to search their library.
Yeah. But for anybody else, what would we replace the Arbiter with? I don't think we want to change any more Giver of Runes. Yeah, we have Giver of Runes. We have... Ooh, Javier says, I'm a level 3 judge in Yu-Gi-Oh! Holy crap. In Yu-Gi-Oh! We check deck for marked cards, torn sleeves, and deck list. Do you guys do this too? Yes.
Yes, it's 10% of the field is the rule of thumb. Is that we want to do a deck check, a complete deck check on 10% of the field. So it's not every deck. We do kind of rely on you as the player if you spot something wrong with your deck or your opponent's deck to take action and make it known and to fix it.
Right. Oh, Charming Prince is not bad. You know, I'm still not in love with Esper Sentinel, although this could be an Esper Sentinel deck. I think Restoration Angel is a fantastic one, though. If you don't want Arbiter, play red-white. That's a possibility, too, but this deck is clearly in the white. Oh, Elite Spellbinder. I like that one. I like Elite Spellbinder. I'm not a fan of Esper Sentinel because Death and Taxes is not fast, it's slow. So I don't think you're going to get as much of enough value out of Esper Sentinel, but Elite Spellbinder I think is actually an excellent choice. This is a very good one. So if you take out Arbiter, if you want to, this is a potential replacement. Do we have enough 2-drops though? We have Stoneforge. We might be super high on 3-drops. We have a lot of 3-drops in the... No, we have Thalia, Stoneforge Mystic. Hard to tell. Hard to tell. I'm not going to blame you if you have Arbiter in here. It'll be okay, but, like... I'm just letting you know from what I'm seeing from Death and Taxes, the Death and Taxes community, they're not as high on this card. And as things get more mana efficient, it'll become less useful. Flicker Wisp is really good because it can blink Kuldra and Batterskull should get their tokens and bounce removal. Sure. Oh, I mean, yeah, actually you only have one Flicker Wisp. I actually can't get behind that. You gotta have more Flicker Wisp in this deck. I love Flicker Wisp. This is a fantastic card. I know you have one more in the sideboard, so maybe instead of 2 Leon and Arbiter, I'd have 2 more Flicker Wisp. But I don't feel strongly about this opinion. And then if you don't have any more Arbiters in your deck, I don't know what to do with your Ghost Quarters.
Arbiter is still a good card, but
let's just see what Spider Space is doing. MTG Goldfish. What are you up to, Spider Space, for a Death and Taxes player? Looks like he hasn't played Death and Taxes for a while.
I'm looking at a Death and Taxes list that's voting Imperial recruiters, which is pretty spicy.
It looks like the last time. Oh yeah, yeah, the red-white
Yeah.
taxes deck is pretty neat. The last time Death Spider Space played Death and Taxes, it was with Yorion, and it did have Arbiter though. It did have Arbiter. Let's see. I'm gonna quickly look at decks, popular decks, just to confirm that like Arbiter's on its way out. Maybe it's not. I remember there was a point where everyone's like, okay, Arbiter's done for. No, Death and Taxes is still on the tier list somewhere here. Hasn't completely fallen off the map. It's pretty far. We have a 5-0 here. Oh, it's still Leon and Arbiter. And no Flicker Wisp. Nothing. Oh, but this is red-white. Okay, this is red-white for Imperial Recruiter, which I can get behind. Okay, scrap everything I said. Leon and Arbiter, 100% index. But is this... Does the Leon and Arbiter make the deck good? Or is this what's holding it back? Because Death and Taxes is not in super well position right now. Only 0.8%. Well, according to MTG Goldfish, 0.8%. Not a high meta percentage whatsoever. So I'm just going to say the deck is good as is. I don't think there's any strong changes you need to make. The deck is strong. And maybe Flicker Wisp has... There's some downside to Flicker Wisp in that it's like it's a 1 toughness creature. Prismatic Ending doesn't work very well in a deck that only has one color. And I know you got a few other colors with like Silent Clearing and Sunbaked Canyon, but that's not enough. Not enough at all. I also think the deck wants Solitude. If you have the Arbiter, giving them free lands with Thalia in the deck is terrible. What are you talking about here? I mean, Solitude is a solid card. I don't know if Death and Taxes can come back, though, from like the card disadvantage. James has a quick rules question. After each round, does your deck get inspected to make sure all sideboard cards are returned to the sideboard and you're running your main 60?
No, it's a random check, so it's up to you to be honest with your sideboard cards. And when you do get hit with a random check, if you're in game 1 and they find out that there's improper sideboard cards there, that's you're now out of battery, so to speak, with what a legal deck would be. I'm not going to say you're cheating because everybody makes mistakes.
Oh yeah, I've even myself. Oh well, I noticed this immediately, and I thought I was going to get a game loss. But in the first round of a tournament, I looked through my sideboard and I realized, shit, this is not what I put on my deck list. I just assumed my deck was exactly to my deck list. I just called the judge on myself. Fortunately, it was just a warning. In the past, that was you lost that game. You're in deep trouble. But rules are more lenient. This is the thing. They want to promote you to be honest. In the past, if you knew you're going to get a game loss. And I'm a pretty honest player, so if I'm going to get the game loss, whatever, I'm going to get the game loss. No big. I play a million tournaments. I don't care. But if you know you're going to get the game loss, then you don't really want to call anything on yourself ever and try to get away with it as much as possible. So I guess
and that's an issue with generating round slips or generating who goes first on pairings is the fact that I can be, I'm playing Nikachu, I know he plays Merfolk. I better pre-sideboard.
They better not be doing that to me.
Yeah.
It's possible, though.
Like I would pre-sideboard against Merfolk. Get out here.
Yeah. Path to Exile. Well, Path to Exile is not a big anti-synergy with Thalia. I don't think it's... You meant replacing Path with Solitude? People are high on it. Yeah, but Solitude requires you to dump a card. You have to dump a whole card. They are... Okay, so they're high on it in the Taxes Discord for even a 60-card mono white, because if you have Scrap Arbiter, you give your opponent lands 100% of the time with Path. I mean, that's true. I want to say I've seen a On Thin Ice version of of Death and Taxes, but I might be
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe that doesn't actually exist.
I like that. I like Path, but in my opinion, Path is an aggro card, where I don't care if you curve out because I'm going fast on you. Death and Tax is a bit more grindy, so the drawbacks of Path are going to be more pronounced with that.
Okay, so the opinion is maybe if we do take out Leonin Arbiter, replace Path to Exile with Solitude. I mean, Solitude's a very good card. I'm really not going to doubt the power of Solitude. Solitude is great stuff. Great feedback. Okay, we'll do one. We're going to speed run this next one. Cardboard Stacker. Congratulations, you're the next contestant. Please make this easy. Mono Blue Ponza. Beautiful. Is this Ponza?
Oh,
This is
Ponza.
Mono Blue.
Ponza. Is it wet Ponza?
Yeah, is it wet
Buddy.
Ponza? Is it moist Ponza?
Buddy, moist Ponza. I'm
Mono
about
Blue
this.
Ponza, but I'm seeing like a lot
A
of
plus.
non-Ponza cards. We have Trickster, Brazen Bar, Tempest Djinn. I love this card. I think this should see more play in Modern. It's actually quite a huge fucking creature for 3 mana. Like, at turn 3, it'll be like a 3/4, but like it can get obscenely large, especially in the late game. I was so impressed when I played with this card, and I could randomly have an 8/4 creature. There's some games where I just like, how the hell do I come back? How do I race this situation? I top deck Tempest Djinn. Like, oh, this is how we're racing this situation. So we have Trickster, Brazen Bar, Djinn, Curator of Mysteries.
That card knocked me out of the last PTQ I played.
This one?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, in Standard, I'm guessing.
In Standard, yeah.
Yeah, that was a Standard powerhouse. People, they wanted to cut him. No way. I thought that was the best card in the deck. Curator of Mysteries, Master of Waves. So we got Vapor Snag, Cryptic Command, Force Seas Claim, 4 Convincing Mirage, 4 Spreading Seas. You at the very least, and 23 Islands. I think you have too many things at 4 mana. Curator of Mysteries, Master Waves, and Cryptic Command. I think Master Waves and Cryptic Command should be the top of your curve. I actually don't know why you want this in your deck at all. This seems very unnecessary. You should just have anything else. Even maybe more land destruction cards. You could play with like even what's this? You could play with that new one draw or not one draw. Like, yeah, Rishidan Dockhand, maybe.
Yeah, Dockhand and what's the new Merfolk mini Spreading Seas? What's his name?
Yeah, maybe that one's better, Tide Shaper, because that doesn't tie up your mana. Dockhand ties up your mana, and you have quite the curve. So but I see the idea. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with this. I would definitely say go for it. Too bad there isn't a better payoff for your blue devotion on the battlefield. There's nothing. It's just Master of Waves. Just add Urza's Saga for what? What artifact are we going to look for? Curator is a cantrip and a win con. Yeah, but cantrips are useless. Like no deck plays the only cantrip that's useful is Street Wraith that like makes you lose life for the purposes of getting your Death Shadow online.
I know this isn't really in the spirit of Decklist review, but I want to point out, unless you have 4 Force of Negation, I don't know if I'd be spending $400 for 4 Force of Negation in the sideboard.
No,
So
it's
if you own them, that's great, but I think
yeah, if you own them, that's good.
I'd be putting money other places. Yeah.
Well, they have it already. I mean, if I don't see it already in their deck, I just assume that they're on a budget. Yeah. It's true. Like more than half of the deck is just these Force Negations, which are now exactly $100. Interesting. The sideboard is fine. That's totally fine. I can get behind this deck, but the Curator Mystery should be something else. Let's see. What's a good mono blue card? You have. By the way, I don't like Trickster. I mean, I guess Trickster is good right now because of Urza's Saga. So it just blows up the construct tokens. So I guess I can get behind that. And also, you have so much hate against Urza's Saga. Like all this stuff blows up Urza's Saga.
I like Trickster. I think it's a very versatile card.
Against maybe we should just play Counterspell. Yeah, maybe we could just play Counterspell instead of this. The Curator Sphinx lets you cycle for 1 blue. Yeah, but like that doesn't matter. It's much more important to impact the battlefield. So we have like 5 things to do on turn 1. Probably should have more things to do on turn 1, if anything. I would put you could put Counterspell over this. we don't have many big win conditions. We have basically Master of Waves, Jin. Borrower's okay. It's okay. But maybe we do want more disruption in the form of counterspells. So maybe I could choose counterspell over Curator Mysteries. I'm not a fan of this card. This is just... the thing... Okay, if you... What do you want? Master Waves or Curator Mysteries? Or Cryptic Command? You got to choose one of these. You have to dump them. You have too many things that are... You have 12 4-drops. This is the most clunky thing I've ever seen in my life. I think Counterspell's better than Mystical Dispute.
I'd be focusing more on land disruption. So if you're gonna wield the title Ponza.
Yeah, that's true. If we're gonna be a mono blue Ponza deck, we should have more disruption. So we could play with Tide Shaper. It can die though.
The goal is not to win. The goal is to make your opponent quit.
There's a difference. Click is really vulnerable these days. 1 toughness it just hurts too much. Those lava darts will shoot it down. I mean, that's a vulnerability with even Brazen Borrower right now. And Master of Waves. Can we play something else? Are we going to play some Curator of Mysteries just to have a big 4 toughness creature? Like it still gets killed by Fatal Push, but it doesn't get hit by Lightning Bolts. No, there's this. Actually, Master Waves is a little bit safer. Just a little bit safer, though. Why not Thought Monitor? Because it only has... you need artifacts in your deck. We have no artifacts. Otherwise, Thought Monitor is a 5-mana body, draw 2. Not very impressive. Not impressive at all. It's more impressive if you can pay 1 mana for a 2/2 flyer that draws 2.
It's going back to the days of Muldrifter.
Yes, that's right. The days of the Muldrifter. Anyway, I'm not super thrilled with Curator of Mysteries. You could maybe play... Even Harbinger might be better. It's not a good way to win the game. I will admit, I want one more way to win the game. This is a way to win the game. This is a way to win the game. But if they kill it, you need another way to win the game.
I'd be looking at
this
lands.
is just so expensive.
I'd be doing the old control trick of putting your win conditions in your lands. So I'd be looking at creature lands, Mutavaults possibly. You know, the new Forgotten Realms, Hall of the Storm Giants, looks like a pretty decent mono blue finisher.
Maybe that's possible. It is difficult to put more Mutavaults in a deck with Tempest in, though. I'll admit it makes this card very clunky very quickly because one Mutavault and now you can't even cast this thing reliably. Well, anyway, those are the suggestions for today. So thank you very much, everyone, for the super chats, but also for the discussion. We got to thank Morgan. You give a like there on YouTube. You give a like on Facebook for Morgan coming out here talking to us about dice. It was a great discussion. And also, all just the general Magic Judge stuff. So, do you have any final words to leave with our audience, Morgan, today?
Yeah, if you want to follow my antics, you can follow me on stout_beasts on Twitter. I post magic there.
Didn't know you wanted to get a shout out on Twitter, but give me that, then I can edit that into the description for anyone. Sure. We're going to have that in the description below eventually. I mean, if you're watching us on the replay, you're definitely going to see that. Go check out
my 5 followers.
Yeah. You can join him, a D&D and Magic player and aficionado of the manufacturing of dice. But it was really insightful information. And maybe the most important takeaway is that we're going to be forced to play with D20s just because it's the flavor of the set, not that Wizards actually cares about the fairness of the dice.
Yeah, and I think the take home is if everybody has to play in a genuine way, and if there's a problem, just call the judge. We all have to be nice to each other. That's kind of for everything.
Call a judge. That's right.
Yeah.
So as usual, coffee crew, keep brewing up those coffees, and we'll keep brewing up magic. See you all next time.